let's look at the data part. So we are still focusing on Exchange, and of course, Exchange. We work with mailboxes, so we have the mailbox databases here. That is one part. Now the thing is with Purview, if we look at Microsoft Purview and the data protection, then basically what we can say about Purview is that it's Purview is all about uh, it's about protecting protection of your data. That is what Microsoft Purview is all about. Now, if you need to protect your data, there's a couple of things that you need to know. First of all, you need to know what your data estate is. Data estate is a Microsoft word that they use to sort of identify all the different locations where where data is being stored. So we need to know the data estate. And once we know where my data is, where my data is stored and in what ways, we then want to understand our data. We need to understand what kind of information is hidden in all of those emails, those documents, attachments, um, chats that we are sending back and forth. That is what Purview is about. So if we understand where the data is and with what kind of information we are dealing in that data, then we can think about protection. So if we think about Purview, then basically Purview next to other locations, by the way. So one of the locations that we are focusing on in this course is, of course, Exchange Online. However, actually data could be stored in many different cloud applications. Now, we do have different kinds of cloud applications. For example, we can think about the Microsoft cloud applications, of which Exchange Online is one, but there's also, for example, SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, Teams, and so on. Sometimes data is stored also in third-party applications, like for example Salesforce or like Visma or whatever kind of third-party app you can think of. And data can be stored in line of business applications or components. Could be in this example, when it comes to Purview, we can think about, for example, a SharePoint server, which is the on-premise version of SharePoint. And we can also think about file shares, like just traditional file shares. Now, if you want to understand your data, then basically what Purview is going to do, Purview is going to classify your data. So we are going to set up data classification. Now, data classification has basically two areas that we need to focus on. First of all, the data classification component in Purview needs to understand where it needs to be able to communicate with the data that we want to classify. So, for example, when it comes to the Microsoft locations, then we can see that this is just a built-in functionality. If we want to get data, if we want to understand data in third-party locations in Purview, we can set up something called connectors. And when it comes to line of business locations, so our own on-prem environment, then we can create something called, we can use a scanner utility. And that scanner is an agent you need to install in an on-prem server. And then you can configure that scanner to monitor, to scan your file shares and your on-premise SharePoint servers. So that is three different data locations. One other location that I just want to put a little bit on the side, but which is also important in Purview, is another location is on devices. So we may have data located on devices. And if we want to add this kind of data in the classification part, so if we want to connect to a device and start understanding what kind of information is stored here, we actually would need the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint sensor, which is the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint client, to be deployed to that device. So in Purview, we first need to go and tell where is our organizational data. This is the data estate. And then we need to understand the data. And if we need to understand the data, we have different options. One way to understand data, one way to do so, is by implementing something called sensitive information types. Another way is by making use of trainable classifiers. And yet another way is by implementing something called exact data matching. About exact data matching, this will only work on databases, meaning that if you store data in SQL type of databases, then you can also look for content there. Sensitive information types is the most used option here. And this is making use of regular expressions to identify data types. For example, if you need to recognize a credit card number, you will be looking for a string of numbers. For example, how many characters? Let's say 15 characters long or so, 15 or 16 characters long. And if it starts with 3753, then it's an American Express card. If it starts with, I don't know, 2570, it could be Visa or MasterCard. You know, there's all kinds of rules, and regular expressions allow you to monitor for those rules. And you can also use regular expressions to find driver license numbers, passport numbers, physical addresses in India, well, all kinds of types. Next to regular expressions, we can also use, let's say, word matching capabilities to say, hey, for example, sometimes we work with a certain word, like if the word is invoice, then we might be dealing with an invoice. Huh? Or if the word is credit card, then, well, close to that word, we might be finding a number that represents a credit card number. So typically what we see is that regular expressions and word matching are used alongside each other in order to be able to, well, have any kind of confidence in that we are dealing with a certain type of information. If you want to manage Purview, you need to be in the Purview portal. So you can go to purview.microsoft.com, and what you do here in this location, you can you want to be configuring the environment. And if I go into one of my solutions, and one of the solutions is information protection, then in the information protection solution, you can see that we have an area for classifiers. And we can see we have the trainable classifiers, the sensitive information types, and the EDM, the exact data matches classifiers. If I check out my sensitive information types, then what I get to see is a list of over 300 different sensitive information types that I can work with. So here we can see a list, and this just gives you an idea of what kind of data we are able to recognize based on these sensitive information types. You can see that some of the sensitive information types, they only work for Microsoft 365 locations. Some of them work everywhere, depending on what you are connecting to in your data estate, right? So that is what we could recognize from that end. We can see who published the sensitive information type. So if I go for the word credit card number somewhere here, you can see that I'm also able to create my own sensitive information types if I have something that I use, right? In this case, I try to create credit card recognizers. Microsoft also has one themselves, but here we can see a lot of those. What you can also see is that some sensitive information types have a little open in a new window button, some of them don't. If I open up one of these, like, because if I select one, the only thing I can do is test, right? So basically, if I want to test this, I can upload a file that contains, in this example, a German physical address, and it will then, if I click test, it will tell me if it found a German physical address or not. That's it. So this is one of those that I cannot do anything with. However, if I check out this one here, I can open one in a new window. This will take me to the sensitive information type that I'm working on. And here you can see, once my loading is finished, I have options to test or copy this sensitive information type. As you can see, I cannot delete or edit it. The ones that are created by Microsoft are locked. However, what I could do is copy one, because if I create a copy, so in this case, I can search for the word copy because I have created a couple of copies. So here we have, for example, the Netherlands passport number here. If I open this one up, then because I created a copy, now it is a thing that I created. And therefore, I am now also able to test, copy, but also edit or delete this sensitive information type. And I like to do the editing thing because if I click edit, I can sort of dive deeper into what it does, right? So if I click next, I can see that it's looking for patterns. And because a computer has to go through my data, like AI and machine learning, also a computer is sort of doing things, then, well, sometimes this will result in false positives, it will result in false negatives. So therefore, we are using confidence levels to express how certain we are, thinking that we are dealing with, in this case, with a Dutch passport number. So for example, the first pattern, which is giving me high confidence, I can open it up like this, and I can see that in this case, we are using a regular expression that is here to recognize a Dutch passport number. And so this is one item, and we are also going to look for certain words within the proximity of 300 characters to that passport number. So if we think we have found a Dutch passport number, we're going to look for keywords that would maybe help us identify that we are actually dealing with a Dutch passport number. Now, I can also, if I want to edit this, so I can change this. And here we can see, for example, we can actually dive deeper into the regular expression. And this is the regular expression. Right? So you can also, by the way, copy this. Right? Click copy. And then you can go and check out something called the regex tester, for example. There's regex101.com, and here you can, for example, insert your regular expression, and now I can go in and start typing things and see if it works. Now I actually recently had to get my passport sort of replaced because, well, I had it for 10 years. My old passport number is NXL, I think NXL, I think 8 R, and then 669 or something, right? But you do here, I'm probably, it might be wrong, but here on the right hand side, we basically go and see, hey, do we have a match, right? So if maybe I need to do something else because it's, see? So there was apparently one more number, but now we can see that we actually see that we have a match. Just like that, right? So we have, so apparently, and this is basically the regular expression. We'll just, and it's quite hard to understand what it says, but it's some kind of a coding kind of language that would say, hey, we are looking for a total of, let's say, 9 characters, could be either letters and numbers, and it starts with a letter, and there's a number, and then another letter, and a couple of numbers. Like that, right? So we can, basically, this is what we are looking for. But also, for example, if I would change one of those letters to, let's say, maybe a smaller letter, it might no longer work. Might work, might no longer work, because we can also look for, let's say, capital or uppercase or lowercase and that stuff, right? If I'm going to add more numbers here, you can see that it doesn't match anymore. So we are actually looking for 9 characters. But the problem with this, especially in the EU, is that probably all passport numbers are built similar. So how can we tell the difference between a Dutch passport number compared to a Belgian or Norwegian or German passport number? Well, then we are going to do the extra word matching thingy, right? So here we have the regular expression could sort of take care of the first bit, like, hey, do we think that we are dealing with a Dutch passport number? If the answer is yes, then we are going to look for, well, supporting elements, and we are looking for keywords. So we are looking for words that are in this list, which is just quite a short list of words, right? But this is a word group that would be telling something about passport. And if I want, I can also search, I can add my own lines, like we can also go and say, hey, this is passport number, which is, let's say, Dutch for passport number, right? So we can look for that, right? This is something we could choose to change. Or we also have this one here. And oh, actually, it's actually looking for that here. See? So this is words that may also identify that information. We can even add more checks if we wish to. We can exclude values or exclude duplicate characters, or if it starts with something or ends with something. Those kinds of things we can configure all that. And this is how we can now say, if we have this match, the regular expression plus the words, then we have a high confidence that we are dealing with a Dutch passport number. We can also do a medium confidence part where we may have a different regular expression or a different word list that we're working with in order to get to a, let's say, lower match, right? So like that, we can even create our own patterns if necessary, and then we can go and say, okay, what is the recommended confidence level here? So if we have one of those matches, what is it? And then if we're done, that is basically allowing us to change and work with that with sensitive information type. So if we implement this, basically what we do here is that we are going, first of all, we're going to tell where is our data, and then data classification is going to connect to those data locations, scan all the content, and it will then mark this content or this document to be containing certain kinds of information. That is what data classification is about. Now, sensitive information types make use of regular expressions and word matching. Trainable classifiers make use of machine learning. Machine learning models are created by Microsoft to recognize all other kinds of data. If I check out my trainable classifiers here, you can see a long list, mainly focused on the English language. But it can recognize business plans, corporate sabotage, discrimination, financial audit reports, HR data, intellectual property, IT data, invoices, license agreements, all kinds of data. I have to be honest, it doesn't work very well yet in smaller organizations. The reason for this is that we do not have a lot of data to work with in order to train the model better. So what you'll notice is that here I get a lot of false positives. Also because if I, for example, check threats, let's say I want to check the threat trainable classifier, I can then check out in my organization if I have items that match this trainable classifier. So as you can see, in my case, I have 513 threats. I have 214 in Exchange, 192 in Teams, 97 in OneDrive, and 6 in a location that we don't know. Probably this is going to be SharePoint probably. Now this is so, and oh, and by the way, one more thing. I can also check out which ones. I can click here and I get to see which items contain threads. Now, so here we can see, oh, well, we have 214 threads in Exchange, 97 in OneDrive, 4 in SharePoint, and a lot of them in Teams. I can open, let's say I want to open this in OneDrive, like this. I can then even look at in which OneDrive do we see those threads, not just, and you could question now, hey, is this legit that I can actually see the content of other users? Now, obviously, this is something you cannot do by default. Even if you're a global admin, you do not have the permission to check these things out. You'll actually have to add those permissions. And typically, you want to be very careful in handing these permissions out. But here, for example, I can go into my own OneDrive. I could also take my girlfriend's OneDrive. So we can ask, like, who is she threatening? Huh? But let's be nice and check my own OneDrive here. Then I can go in and I would actually be able to see, oh, okay, that was nice. Still trying. It's still trying, so let's wait for this. So, but I can actually see which documents in OneDrive contain these threads. But again, these trainable classifiers are based on models that Microsoft created to recognize, in this example, threads in English. Now, we do have an enormous amount of false positives here, because if I type my things in Dutch, if I use the Dutch language, and there is a word that is a normal Dutch word, but that could be sort of recognized as English threatening. Yeah, this, oh, okay. This used to work. So let's see Teams. It should be able to see this stuff. Or maybe let's see if it gives me more information now. But typically you can actually see the content here as well, including emails. So here we have, oh, this is nice. We have trainable classified threads, targeted harassment and everything. So you can also go in, this is like Teams messages. So I can even go in and open this up. Let's see what I'm looking at. Ah, okay, here. This is a text Teams message that I've sent to someone about that I still have to book my flights, but I think I will travel from 28 February to 3rd March and from 17 to 21 March. Now, obviously, this is not a threat in English. So that's where, so if you are in a multilingual environment, it's going to be tough. You can see the contextual summary, so basically some extra information about, hey, what is this about, or some details, right? So we can see these things, but as you can also tell, hey, this is actually not very, very useful at the moment. The reason mostly is that my data set is too small. I'm in instead of multiple languages. And by the way, also the same thing counts for sensitive information types. Now, one of the things I can do if I want to sort of monitor what data classification has been doing, then we have the explorers here. And one of the explorers is the data explorer. And here we can actually filter for sensitive information types, retention labels, trainable classifiers, and more. So for example, here, if I want to see all the sensitive information types that I have found in my own tenant, I can see, for example, diseases here. So I have a sensitive information type about diseases. Let's say I want to check that one out, right? So let's say I want to go in and check for diseases. Then I can go, for example, and look into Exchange. So I can open up Exchange. I can select my sensitive information types and then see how many matches I have for a certain sensitive information type. So here, when it comes to diseases, I have this mailbox. And then in this mailbox, I have a lot of names of diseases. Now, well, ADD is something that, you know, that is, well, I'm not sure if it's a disease, but it's something medical, right? That makes sense. Other stuff is, oops, not this one. Let's say I am going to look at about this, right? Something with DPP event Intune. Now, I don't know, maybe DPP is is a disease as well. I don't know. Could be. But in this case, it's like a partner event, right? For a certain organization. So if you work with these things, then you might have a lot of those sensitive information types that make absolutely no sense for your organization. For example, I very often have the acronym MS in my documents because I work with Microsoft a lot. So I shorten that to MS, but MS is also a disease. So how am I, so this will give me a lot of false positives on that part. So what we actually see happening a lot is that most organizations, they in the beginning when they use this, they actually do not care about any existing trainable classifier and any existing sensitive information type, but they can just start by creating their own sensitive information types that will recognize data that is relevant to your organization. And that's what we will be working with, right? That makes more sense, I think. But hey, this is where it starts. So we have sensitive information types, trainable classifiers, and by the way, exact data matching is just sensitive information types for databases. I'm going to skip that for now. And now what we see is, so if we have done this, we can then use a tool. We can then use we can use a tool to allow us to go into that data, like I just showed you. There is a data explorer tool that will allow us to get insights in what has been happening inside that class. That's so much sense. I'm going to open the door to get a little bit more oxygen in this room. I think that is useful. I can see some people have hard times to stay awake. Yes. Good. No, I understand. It's you know.
Unless I have so much input in one day.
I know. I'm sorry about that, but it's no, so that's why I just open up the door. You know, I'm the same thing, right? If I have to listen, you know, it's like hard to sort of keep focus.
Completely. I haven't been to Purview. I tried to figure out which one of the DLP is the company of.
Yeah, this is good stuff. This is really good stuff.
Simple to see, to say. I'm 40 all
But he didn't. He did it. 5. Well, that's not too bad. No, it's all right. Hey, but oxygen will definitely help. Oxygen is going to help.
To the top of the bar and it was close on.
Really?
Sleep.
Well, then you have to go to sleep. Yeah, no other option. Well, the entire city was filled with people celebrating Halloween. That was. I have seen a lot of people dressed up for Halloween. Nicely, by the way.
I saw some geriatric patients, sorry, geriatric people in the top one that had the bar.
But not dressed for Halloween. Right? Hey, so we have this data explorer. This will help us look at this data estate, matching the data classification thing. But that by itself does not protect our data. That is just us, the admins, looking at the data that has been classified. Now, we want to take it one step further. And well, when we think about Microsoft Purview, then there is actually quite a few solutions that we can implement when it comes to well, protecting our data. Now we are going to focus on Exchange in this training. So let's look at what we can do with Exchange first. Now, first of all, if we think about let's say the Purview solutions, so let's say solutions in Purview, then one of them is something called data lifecycle management. Data lifecycle management is all about data retention and data deletion. Oh, deletion. We can create retention policies where we can go and say, hey, if we find in any data location that supports us, if we find data that matches a certain sensitive information type or trainable classifier, then we are not going to allow people to delete that data. From the end user perspective, it may seem deleted, but it's not deleted. We can always find it back. That is data retention. And sometimes we have to retain data by law. In the Netherlands, for example, where I'm from, we have a lot of laws that say, hey, if we are dealing with healthcare related data, you have to at least save it for 10 years. Or there's a maximum saving time for 15 years or so, right? Depends on if you're an organization and you have all your financial data needs to be stored for at least, what is it, 7 years or so, right? So that is the things that we need to do. So that is life cycle management. There's rules for that. And those will also apply to mailboxes. So one of the things we can do here is going to solutions, going to data lifecycle management here. And here we can go and start creating policies. We start with creating retention labels. Those labels, we can go and say, hey, you know what? Let's say I have a certain type of data that I need to retain for a certain time. So let's say demo 1, 2, 3, a description for the users. So let's say, well, for the users, I'm going to also say all this stuff. But if I check out the label settings, I have options like, hey, do you want to retain items forever or for a specific period? Do you want to enforce certain actions after a specific period? Or do you just want to label items, which just, allows you to sort of flag them, but there's no policies attached to it, right? So in this case, I would want to go and say the first option. So for how long do I want to retain the data? Let's say I want to retain data for, let's say I'm going to choose 5 years, 5 years. Well, or maybe something else that is a little bit more off, let's say 25 years. I don't know. That's what you can do. When are we going to start the labeling? When the item was created, or when we labeled this. So we create a document today, we label it next year. That's when we start counting 25 years, right? We can also integrate this solution with HR software. So basically, we can go say, hey, we can connect this to other systems, and then wait for those kinds of triggers. Let's say I'm going to say when the item is created, all right? And then at the end of that 25 period, do you want to delete everything automatically or start a disposition review? And then we have to assign somebody to go into that data and file by file decide whether we're going to keep or delete the data, or just change the label to another label, or run a Power Automate flow where we can select a little bit more automation, but we have to, well, sort of prepare those Power Automate flows if you have one, or just deactivate retention settings on that document, right? So that is something we could do here. And then when you're done, click finish, and that will create your retention label. I have a few here. Now, by just creating the labels, nothing will happen at all. So one of the things that we need to do is once we have created the label, we need to publish the label. And publishing a label is just creating a policy what? Oh, I'm not. So what label would you like to publish? For example, Microsoft information retained 1 year. Let's say that. That's just a sample thing I created. Then I'm gonna go and say, okay, where are we going to do this? We can set up a scope, be adaptive or static. Adaptive could be based on locations, for example, and or departments, or I can just go and choose static, and then I can choose the locations where I want this label to be available. Everywhere or just in certain areas. So I could go and say, no, this is something I only want to do in Exchange. Oh, and by the way, not all of my mailboxes will get this, but just a few of my users maybe, right? All the users that have a mailbox, I can select in this case. Let's say all locations, all users. Then publish the policy, create the policy like this. Next, finish, and the policy is created. From the end user's perspective, right? From the, let's say we are the end user here. Let's say,
Do you need E5 license to?
no, data retention is E3. Yeah. Machine learning, dus those trainable classifiers, is E5, for example. Yeah. So let's say I have a email here. This is an email that I got from PSV, best football club in the Netherlands. Ajax sucks. We all hate Ajax. We beat Bode Glimt last time we played them, so we're good, right? So this is an email, right? Boo, yeah. So this is an email. Then what we can do at this point is a couple of things. One of them is not here, I think. No, it's here in message. So this is the menu for the message. Yeah, something with Outlook for macOS, they have weird things. So I have my message here as a window, but if I want to see all the functionality of that I have in that message, I have to go here. But what we do have is, if I go a little bit further down, we have here under retention, we have those retention labels that I have published. So now I could go and say, hey, this is, let's say, retain important data. Let's say that this is it. Flag this, and now you can see that my email has been flagged, and it's going to be expired at 2034. The interesting thing is, where are those 2 days? Because I did 10 years, but 10 years is in my environment calculated as 10 times 365 days, but we have leap years. Again, apparently between now and 2034, we have 2 leap years. So I'm missing 2 days because today is November 1st. Interestingly, but hey, that doesn't, it's just a few days, so we don't care about that. But now retention is enabled. If I would to delete this email, it's going to be deleted from my mailbox. I, as a user, can no longer see it. But if I go into Purview, if I use the search function, here we have a search function, explore all functions, and then we are looking for. It's interesting. We used to have a nice button that went in and say, hey, let's just search for content. Maybe in the they changed it, right? So there's some kind of well, I know one way to get access to it is by going to eDiscovery, right? Like this, because here we can create cases. Oh, here, content search. This is the one I was looking for. So I can then go and search here for keywords, and I can set all kinds of filters to search for content. So here we can create a search. I have a couple of searches created already, and that allows me to search for that data. So even if it's deleted for a even though it's deleted for the user, we can still find it because it's not being deleted because we have retention put onto that. Now, when we think about data lifecycle management, then
stored outside its mailbox. So
it's it doesn't count as user size.
Yeah, that- these are- they can then.
so they're starting to use this now.
We have something else in the check. We got that much information
Yeah.
to the label. And,
Well-
it's a part of the. we-
Yeah, but you have to be aware when we think about labeling documents, we have data lifecycle management works with retention labels. We also have classifying labels, right? Or sensitivity labels, as they're called. They have different purposes. Yeah. So this is just about retention. Before I move on to the classification part, to the sensitivity labels, you can also auto apply labels. So using this, we can also set up auto labeling for this, where I can go and say, hey, apply label to content that contains sensitive information, for example. Like, hey, if I have in my organization credit card information or healthcare related data because I have those sensitive information types, then I want to automatically apply that label. So that is those sensitive information types that we just regular expressions, word matching. So, or label matches the trainable classifier, or automatically label to cloud attachments and link shared in Exchange, Teams, View Engage, and Copilot. And this is just based on the location. So you can go and say, hey, you know what? If we have a document that is being created in a certain SharePoint site, or in a, let's say in a SharePoint site like this. So in my case, I have, for example, a SharePoint site called Microsoft, which is in a team that I created called Microsoft. If this is the case, or data in certain OneDrive environment, let's say in this case, I want to focus on Microsoft 365 group sites, then I can add a label that I pre-created, where I can go and say, hey, this is Microsoft information retained 1 year, like that. So basically what I'm doing is now because I'm selecting a certain location. So if it doesn't matter what I store in that SharePoint site, but if I store any file in a specific SharePoint site, then I will apply a label to keep the document for at least a year. And then after that, I can sort of test the policy or switch it on, right? And then you go finish, create that policy, and that will then use auto labeling. You can auto label based on content using sensitive information types, trainable classifiers, or any other kind of query that you create at that point, or based on the location. That is what data lifecycle management does. Another system that is very, very similar to this, but different, it's similar but different, is something that is called Microsoft Information Protection. And that is what you just mentioned, like, hey, we can also label the document. However, here we are labeling the document for encryption. So this allows us to encrypt content and set up access management to the document. So we have, again, labels. Now we are going to step away from data lifecycle management. We are going to go into information protection. Also here, we can create labels, but now these are sensitivity labels. And these sensitivity label, each different sensitivity label, let's, for example, edit my GDPR label that I have created. Basically what this label does is if I mark this with GDPR data, right? So if I attach that tag or label to a document or an email, right? Then let's see, what I'm doing is I'm protecting files, I'm protecting emails with this, nothing else for now. I could also protect meetings or SharePoint sites and Teams environments. If you can enable that for your organization. Meeting labeling only works if if you have a license of Teams Premium in your tenant. I have a Teams Premium license in my tenant, therefore I can also label my meetings, which by the way is cool because if I have a recording of the meeting, then that recording of the meeting is automatically applying the security that I set up in the label. Only these users are allowed to access the content, for example. So that is, you can, and for SharePoint sites, if you want to. So what do we want to do with this label? In this label, I want to control access and apply content marking. So basically, I want to, if I have a document with this label, I want to tell that this is that kind of data inside that document. And then I can go and say, okay, what are we going to do? Well, I'm going to encrypt the content. And here I'm going to assign permissions. In my case, what I have done is, and this is just a demo, but this is GDPR data. So one of the things I can do is can say, hey, if anyone in my organization applies this label to a document, then Alex is automatically a co-owner. And anyone else in my organization is automatically going to become a viewer. And you can actually add different levels of access. I can also go and say, hey, and you know what? I have a specific person. Let's say I have a Tony at Microsoft.com or so, which is a friend of mine working at Microsoft. He is going to become a restricted editor. And here we can see he can view the content and he has edit content, save content, but he cannot print or copy or extract. He can reply to emails, forward emails, or right, if it's an email, right? He can allow macros. So we can basically go in and say, hey, we have different levels of access, and we can even go and say, hey, what is this user allowed to do in that case? So you can be very specific once a label is applied. What is actually who is able to access the content? In this case, me, I'm always going to be an owner, and anyone else in the organization is going to be a viewer. Then one more thing we can do is we can even use something. We have content marking here. So if I go next, we have content marking, and I can go say, hey, you know what? I'm gonna create a watermark telling that this is GDPR sensitive, let's say GDPR sensitive information. Font size, let's say this is font size 20. I'm going to put this in red. I'm going to do a diagonal here. Click save. That is what is now being put into my documents diagonally. I can also add a footer. Here, don't share this document with externals. It contains personal information, or maybe personal, and I would say identifiable. Is it that like that? Personal identifiable information. Font size, maybe a little bit bigger, black in the center, maybe left or maybe right. Save. That is what I want there. That is watermarking. However, we can also go here and apply dynamic watermarking. And dynamic watermarking, when a user accesses a file with the label applied, their UPN will be dynamically inserted as a watermark on each page of the file. It cannot be removed or changed by the user. So the cool part here is that if somebody leaks the document, it has their information in. And you can also do a custom text to display together with the user principal name, right? So we can say that this document is edited by like that, and then we have you must include the variable for the user principal name, so you can then do this, copy, paste, right? So you get that as well. That is that is so this is what it looks like. Example, highly confidential would appear as highly confidential user September with a date and time. Okay, so we can also take this on that. So cool. So that is what we can then put into the file as well. Double key encryption is nice because the primary encryption key is managed by Microsoft. Some organizations, by law or by regulation, they have to sort of be in control of their own encryption. Then what you can do is store another encryption key somewhere where you prefer. Azure is in a location, for example, you can use something called a key vault for this. But you can enable double key encryption. You will then point to the second encryption key, and from that point on, all your documents will be encrypted with two keys. Not only the one that Microsoft has, but also the yours. So like that, you can just create that sensitivity label. Here, by the way, the policy says I want to auto label all content that matches these things. That's a long list. I didn't make this up myself. This is template based. Maybe I do not want to auto label, but for now, let's say I want to auto label like that. Oh, by the way, my auto labeling is not super aggressive. Let me show you what I mean. So let's move forward. No, here, access control, content marketing, or here, auto labeling. Where is it? Not here. Where am I in the? I'm in the here. Then I'm there. Then I'm there. This is auto labeling. So here, this is if we find this kind of data, right? Then we want to auto label. However, if I scroll all the way down, I actually have this message here that says, when the content message matches these conditions, recommend that users use the label or automatically apply the label. This is more aggressive. Maybe in this case, you want to start friendly with your users and recommend a label to be used. And then display this message to users when the label is applied. The sensitivity label GDPR has been applied to this document that's containing personal information. That is what we could go and show. And then we're going to skip the database part or groups and sites. I'm going to allow this, I'm going to skip this part. Let me do a quick check what it says. These settings apply to teams, groups, and sites that have this label applied. They don't apply directly to files stored in those containers. So, oh, okay, if we have applied this to a group or a team site or SharePoint, then we can control the level of access for internal, external user, external sharing conditional access, or private teams. For now, I'm going to leave this, and then I can go and click next and save label. I made some changes. I already have the label in many locations. So if I would, for example, open up Microsoft Word here, well, I have a Mac. So Mac is cool. But it took actually, like, what is it? It took like 4 or 5 seconds. I think I need a new Mac. I think I need the new M4 MacBook Pro with a lot of memory and stuff. Let's say I'm gonna create a document here. So this is just a, okay. Where is my Word? Where is Word? Here is Word. Let's say draft a speech. Oh, this is not Copilot. Where's Copilot? Oh, here. Copilot. Here. Draft a election speech by Barack Obama, where where we focus on Microsoft being awesome. Let's have Copilot do its magic. So here we are getting. Of course, Copilot works on Mac. Everything works on Mac. Well, whenever I go to, it's quite interesting. I spend a lot of time in Microsoft offices, and sometimes when I bring my Mac in, there are still people at Microsoft that look at me like, "Are you going to present a Microsoft presentation on a Mac?" I say, "Yeah." Yeah, actually, I know quite a few speakers now that are using Mac nowadays.
Also, several. For 89 US.
Hmm.
Tusen, 12 or 1040, all that. Coming to the big started as then Microsoft Love Linux.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
So fun.
Yeah. That is true. Let's do something else. Yeah, it's Microsoft loves Linux. Intune loves Apple. Right? Yeah, it's okay. Copilot, please.
I think it was support for Linux on the Wii.
Yeah, Linux Hyper-V and no, Azure is built out of many different things. I know that the storage part of Azure is sort of managed by Unix systems, but let's say all of the virtualization is all Hyper-V. So if you run a VM in Azure, it's Hyper-V. There's something called VMware on Azure, which is basically VMware on Hyper-V, but it still works. Okay, this is taking too long. Well, anyway,
To speak to yourself.
I have to make. So let's say I'm gonna here is some info, right? And this is Alex de Jong, and this is his phone number, right? So we are going to phone number here, and we have an email address here, right? And then we can go and say, okay, this is this is this is personal information, so it needs to be protected, right? Protected, like this, right? So here we are working in a document. Let's say I want to store this document somewhere in OneDrive. So I'm going to name this demo 01/11/2024. It's a demo. I'm going to skip the sensitivity label bit here. I could manually now choose. Well, oh, okay. Now I know why it doesn't work. Apparently, I'm signed in here with the wrong account. That sucks. Where is my account? I'm using the wrong account in this setup, therefore it doesn't work, it doesn't do what I want. You know what, I'll do something else here, just to give you another example. Don't save. Let's say I am creating an email. So here I can go and where am I here? So here's an email. So I can, and now as you can see, my email contains information, right? So I can say hey, hi, this is the info you need, like this. I can send it to somebody. I'm going to send this to Michael Scott. Where is Michael Scott? Michael. Oh, did I already do Michael Scott? Michael Scott. Subject info for this user, like this. So here I am. I may want to even attach some kind of a file here. You know what? I'm going to attach this file here. It's some kind of an invoice. So I have this this document here. Then from this point, I can go in and I could have a couple of options. And one of them here is insensitivity. And here you can see that I have a couple of options. And well, I have the opportunity to choose GDPR data, Microsoft NDA, company confidential, right? These are the policies, these are the things I created. And I can manually go in and select this. Now, you can also set this up to automatically recognize content, and then based on that, choose to apply that label, right? So you can then, it would actually tell you here in the top, like, hey, because of the content, we think you should apply this certain label, right? And then you can apply that label. So here I can go in and manually do this. Now you can see that I have this label applied, GDPR data, and then my, well, then I can send the email out, but the label is at least applied. Now this label, if I send this email out, my label protects the content of the email. And one of the things that I've set up in my label is that only people in my own organization are allowed to read the data, nobody else. So Michael would get the mail, would not be able to see the content because I labeled it in a way that I wanted to protect it there. And just like that, we can actually see that in many different ways we can apply those labels. Also here we have the opportunity to create policies, and there's also auto labeling policies we can set up. So you say, like you say, you know what? And I can use templates for this. One of them is, for example, privacy GDPR enhanced. Here is again the things that we are going to look for, right? So there's a long list of things that we can look for in that list, and then go and say, hey, if you find this kind of data, auto label like this, you can also go and say, okay, and I'm going to select the locations where I want to apply this, SharePoint, sites, Exchange email, or OneDrive accounts. And then if I just leave everything open, I can now create a policy rule that says, hey, if you find any kind of this data, automatically apply that label. Now this is a little bit aggressive, right? You can also set up specific rules for different location like this, but you can be more flexible in how to do this. For example, for Exchange, we have these kinds of things, and then you can actually check out how this is going to be applied. So if we find any kind of this information, then we want to set up a, this is if this is the case, right? Or what about SharePoint? What about OneDrive? So if you find this kind of data in those locations, then I automatically want to apply this label. You want to be a little bit careful with this, because the idea behind the labeling is the data will be encrypted, right? And if you did not really set up the permissions right, then users might not be able to be productive anymore, right? So you want to be very careful implementing this kind of technology. The cool bit is, however, that if you apply auto labeling, for example, based on locations, you can then go and say, hey, I'm going to create a label for HR. I'm going to apply that label to the team and the SharePoint sites and everything related to HR. So whenever a document is created in that HR team, which means SharePoint in the back, then we are automatically applying that label. No matter what kind of content, if it's created there, the label applies. So even if you accidentally, if you work in the HR department, if you accidentally pick one of those documents up and send it to someone else in the organization, the label travels with the document and content is protected. Users will not be able to access that content because of that. And that is why we want to be implementing these labels. We want to be protecting our documents like this. There is one more thing that Microsoft recently has been working on, which I haven't seen before. But the thing is, that happens a lot of times when you work with Microsoft products, you know, things change. Here we have the way to set up policies to control access to items that have sensitivity labels applies across data sources like Azure, Amazon, and more. Before you create the first policy, make sure that you are up to speed on the prerequisites needed for supported data sources. Let's review the prereqs. Probably we need an Azure Enterprise, a Purview Enterprise license for this. We have a setting here, account, advanced resource sets. Interesting. Yeah, and we have to have this one. Account type has to be enterprise. That is probably what we need. But then, and we have, yeah, okay. But let's so the auto labeling and publishing the policies, and with that we can every time. Oh, Michael Scott was still here. We just received a message. Alex de Jong, I sent you a protected message. Read the message. I'm going to open up. There's verification happening. Hey, is this user one of those users that is allowed to access the content? Sign in with a worker school account. So I can sign in with my Michael Scott account, which is in a different tenant. So let's see if we are able to see the content to begin with. No permission. So I have sent a message to this user, but I labeled it with a label that only allows people in my own organization to see the content of the message. So therefore, cannot see the message. Pretty cool. I can do other things. For example, I can do one other thing I can do is I could go into Outlook again. Let's say I want to create. Let's say I want to create a new email message. Let's go and take it. Come on. Let's take it here. So this is a new email message. I'm gonna send it to Michael Scott again. Subject test. Now I can go and say I want to add sensitivity, but I'm going to choose custom confidential. Sensitivity, custom confidential. Oh, sorry. Once, like this. Then I can go and say, let's say this is the message. Like this. Test again. Now I'm going to click send. But now I have assigned custom confidential, but I'm sending the message to that user. So let's see, let's check out Michael's mailbox. Waiting for the message. I can see the message, all right? Because custom confidential means I'm sending this to this person, and in that label, only that person can see the message. So here, you can actually see that the message is indeed encrypted. Oh, and what does it say? Oh yeah, so this is indeed encrypted, and we disabled forwarding. So, no forwarding. Can I reply? Then add another one in the destination thing? No. Right, so do not forward, recipients can't forward, print, or copy content. That will always work. See? This is the screenshot. But that might not contain the actual content. So let's go and get rid of this. So where's my drafts? This one. Is there a discard function here? Discard this message. So here we are. Oh, maybe I want to delete this as well while I'm here, and this one too. While I'm here, so this is again the message. Screenshot. Now, this is also because of on the Mac, you actually have different features than on other devices. Anyway, but if I can also not select anything because I was not allowed to copy and also not print this. So that is custom confidential. So I can still send it to my recipient. But the interesting thing is, let's say I enable this by default. So anyone who I send an email can see it, but cannot do anything else with it. Might be interesting for security purposes. So with this, we have information protection capabilities. Now, one other thing that we can implement based on Purview is the solution called data loss prevention. Data loss prevention is about, well, it's about prohibiting people to leak data, right? So block data leakage. That's what we do with this. I have to be honest, not 100% guaranteed, because people can always, if they want to leak data, they can always leak data. They can do this in any kind of way, like taking a picture of your screen, like that. Now, in Purview, we have another solution called data loss prevention. We create policies, and here we can, for example, create I have a general data protection regulation enhanced exchange online policy created. So if can I just select this? I want to click edit. Edit, that allows me to change that policy. This is a data loss prevention policy. So basically the idea is, if people are sending information to people outside of the organization, then I want to block that potentially. So if I want to prevent GDPR kind of data to be sent out of the organization, I have this for email. Then I'm gonna look at my data loss prevention rules. Here we have, let's say I take the first one, low volume of content detected GDPR regulation. I can actually edit this rule and now see what it does. So here we are. So if content is shared from Microsoft 365 as a location, Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, that would be Microsoft 365. If it's shared with people outside of my organization, external users, and the content contains any of these sensitive information types, right? All GDPR related content, and sensitive information type, for example, with full names, or certain tradeable classifiers, if that all matches, right, in the message or the attachment, then we are going to use actions. And in this case, we are going to tell somebody about this. I am not, by the way, going to block anything right now, but I could do that. I could choose an action and say, you know what, I'm going to restrict access or encrypt the content in Microsoft 365 locations, block only people outside my organization. Or I can even go and say, hey, just encrypt email messages using that same label that I just created my sensitive information label for. So I can sort of automate this, or I can just block users outside my organization like this. Can I now? I just want to. Okay, see, I cannot. Okay, maybe I want to cancel this because this is weird. I have a radio button, but two of them are on. That doesn't really work typically. But let's say this is what I want. Well, then I can do that, and that would automatically block this. And data loss prevention will then not allow this email to be sent. That is what we can do. And just like this, you can do all kinds of security things. For example, data loss prevention is something that will also work in it also works in Microsoft Teams. So what I have set up in the tenant of this user here, I have created a data loss prevention policy for this organization that if I am going to share United States addresses with people outside of the organization, I'm not going to allow that. So here I am signed in as Michael Scott, and I have to be patient, which is difficult for me, but not just a little bit. It's like super difficult to me. Almost, almost. Come on, I want to show this. Sorry? Yeah. The system will blow up, or you will blow up.
So,
Are you going to blow up?
but we're gonna get angry.
Oh yes, definitely. Yeah. Oh man, come on, you can do it. Oh, you know what? I think I'm not sure if I enabled it for more than just. You know what? I'm gonna try this. I'm gonna send an email to myself again here, and I'm gonna say the address of Microsoft in Redmond. And then I can go and say, all right, so what we see is the address is 1 Microsoft Way in Redmond. Let's say this is it. And then we can say kind regards. Michael. See how smart this thing is? Michael. Michael. Like this. Okay, good. So I'm gonna send this. It may work, by the way, because I'm not sure if I added this policy just for. So this is me chatting with myself, right? So Michael, this is Michael Scott. By the way, this is Michael Scott. So I did receive the email. Oh, Redman did a typo. I did receive the email, but in Teams, if I go and say, hey, did you get this here? And then I'm going to enter 1 Microsoft Way Redmond like this. Click send. This is what we get. This message was blocked. And in my Teams client, I'm not sure if I have it open. Let me just look if I can find my Teams client. Then I get to see this. Hey, did you get this? Message was blocked due to organization policy. Heart. Like that. So that is, now, of course, you can imagine that I set up my policy probably only for Teams. That's why I got it via email, because you can be very granular in where you want to apply a policy like this and where you don't want to apply a policy like this. So here we can block these kinds of things in many different locations. Policies like these. That is what data loss prevention does. Basically the idea, and this is something that you already have seen in your other Exchange environment, right? Even you can do this in on-prem Exchange. I think ever since Exchange 2010 or so, maybe Exchange 2007, but I think 10. But still, this technology is already there for a long, long time. However, now with Microsoft Purview, we have sensitive information types based on regular expressions, on machine learning. We basically go and do the sensitive information type and trainable classifiers in a central location. And then Exchange is just one of the products that can be part of this, right? Actually, data loss prevention, there is a very special version of data loss prevention. The one that I'm showing you is for Office, let's say Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, Exchange, Viva Engage, which was used to be known as Yammer. But if you have a Microsoft 365 E5 license, you can also implement data loss prevention for endpoints. And then what you can do is prohibit users from uploading sensitive information into web browsers. Let's say you have a user connecting to ChatGPT or Dropbox, or so basically for the user's experience, you might have 2 documents on your desktop. One that contains sensitive information, the other doesn't. You want to print the first one, you can't. The second one, you can. Now imagine what kind of support desk calls you'll get because of that. But it works. It's nice. The thing, by the way, is that Purview only at the moment works for Windows or macOS clients when it comes to data loss prevention for endpoints. However, and that is, and then we can go for a short break. What if I am using my phone again? Here's my phone. So like this. For example, if I open up Microsoft Word here, what is new in Word? Okay, so let's open up a document here. Then I can go into three little dots. I can choose sensitivity. And here is my sensitivity labels. So I can also go and say, hey, this is a Microsoft NDA document. Go back, done. And now I can start typing. This is a doc, not dick, doc, right? And here in the bottom, I think, or in the top, somewhere here in the middle, in the top here, we can see this is my content marking, Microsoft NDA content, highly confidential. But this automatically has also applied the security that I applied to this. So it can only be accessed by me and anyone with an @microsoft.com UPN. So if I want to share secret stuff with Microsoft that I create, which sometimes I do, then this is how I can protect my content only for those people that work at Microsoft. That I know is super cool. So, and this, by the way, so if we look at these solutions, so if I check this one, so these are three, let's say, main components of Purview. There is more components to Purview, which are not per se related to Exchange. Therefore, I want to sort of lock this in as is. If you're interested, we can also take a look at the other ones.